A woman in heels stormed across the street, screeching louder than the tires of the moving truck still backing into the driveway. "Get that trash out of here! You don't live here!" she yelled, pointing with a trembling finger, but her eyes were locked, not on the furniture, on me. I didn't flinch. The heat shimmered off the asphalt. Neighbors peeked through blinds. One of them whispered, "That's Karen from the board. She's about to lose it." And she did. Karen pulled out her phone and dialed 911. "Yes, police. There's a man trespassing on Lake Serenity property. Refuses to move. He's aggressive." That word, aggressive, hung in the air like a noose. She hadn't even asked my name. I stood by the tailgate, sweat rolling down my back, watching her as if I were watching a staged play unravel in real time. Karen's lips twitched as she tried to look brave, but I caught at fear. Not because she knew who I was, but because she didn't. "You don't belong here," she repeated, louder so the neighbors could hear. "You're not approved." She emphasized it like a threat. I didn't respond. I was waiting. I wanted her to dig her own grave before I dropped the shovel in her hands. That's when the first patrol car rolled in. 2 officers stepped out, hands near their belts but not on their weapons. "Sir," the taller one said cautiously, "we received a call about a trespasser." Karen walked forward with the fake confidence of someone who's never been told no in her life. "That's him," she said. "He was warned, this is a private HOA community. You don't let just anyone buy property here," she said. It like a badge in itself. I reached into my jacket slowly. "You sure you want to do this?" I asked her, softly, but not so soft that the crowd couldn't hear. She blinked, sensing something shift. But it was too late. The neighbors had gathered at the edge of their driveways like it was Sunday theater. Karen folded her arms. "We have rules." He didn't submit his application. He didn't go through me. That's how we do things at Lake Serenity. The second officer's brow furrowed. "Did you buy the property, sir?" I turned, walked calmly to the open door of my truck, pulled out the folder labeled deed and handed it over. "I paid in full 3 weeks ago. Closed directly with the owner. No HOA approval needed. It's not mandatory for this lot." Karen's mouth opened, then closed again. "That's not possible. The land belongs to." I cut her off. "The Andersons, who opted out of the HOA in 2014 after suing the board. It's public record." That part hit like a slap. The 2 officers looked at each other. "It looks like you're within your rights," one muttered, flipping through the documents. But I wasn't done. I waited until she stepped back, her hands still clenched around her phone, trembling. "Ma'am," the officer said, "you can't file false reports. This man's not trespassing." Karen didn't respond. I stepped forward and pulled the leather wallet from my back pocket, snapped open with a soft flick. Federal agent. The gold badge gleamed in the sun. Her face drained like someone had pulled the plug on her blood supply. "You called the cops on a federal officer," I said, "and you lied in the report." Suddenly no one was breathing. Karen's knees actually buckled a little. She caught herself on the garden post beside her. I didn't know, ... she whispered. But her eyes said more than her mouth ever could. I turned to the officers. "I'll file an official complaint. False 911 call, harassment, attempted intimidation under false pretenses. That'll be on record by sundown." Karen opened her mouth again, but I raised a finger. "Oh, you already said enough." The officers nodded and walked back toward their cruiser, whispering quietly. Karen didn't move. She didn't dare. That was supposed to be the end of it. But what I didn't know was this wasn't her first time. Karen had buried more than one neighbor with lies, and what I was about to uncover next would make this little driveway show look like a warm-up act. This wasn't about the HOA. This was about control. Karen would burn this whole community down before she gave it up. I should have walked away. I should have packed my boxes, called the movers back, but I didn't. Because something in her eyes said, "You're not safe here." I needed to know why. The neighborhood looked calm, but it wasn't. After the patrol car left, no one spoke. Karen stood motionless by her hedge, pretending to check her phone, but watching me with the intensity of someone who'd just been publicly stripped of her imaginary crown. I walked slowly toward the house I now owned, the lake shimmering behind, it like a false promise. I should have felt relief, victory, but something in the air said otherwise. My training told me to trust that instinct. I wasn't welcome here. Not because I broke rules, but because I couldn't be controlled. The HOA didn't want a resident. They wanted a subject. Karen wasn't done. Not even close. I walked into the cool, silent house. Boxes stacked along the walls. My gear. Still untouched? The lock clicked behind me, and I let the silence wrap around me like armor. But before I could sit down, my burner phone buzzed. Unknown number, I answered. You just made a dangerous enemy, the voice said. Female, breathless. Hung up before I could speak? That was the second warning. The first was in Karen's eyes. I sat down and opened my laptop. I wasn't just a federal agent, I was cyber ops. And now I was curious. Karen wasn't just a bored housewife on a power trip. She was hiding something. Started digging. Public records, HOA documents, legal filings. Most of it was scrubbed clean, but not clean enough. In 2019, a neighbor named Philip Meyer tried to sue the HOA for financial mismanagement. Case dismissed. In 2021, his house burned. Down. Ruling. Faulty wiring. But the power company's report said the panel had been tampered with. 2 months later, he moved states. No contact since. I checked the original HOA board list from 2015. Karen wasn't on it. She only appeared after the 2016 election following the suspicious resignation of the previous president who died in a boating accident the next summer. Pattern. Maybe I was seeing too much. But then I hit something real. A cached webpage only half-loaded referencing a Karen L. Beaumont as a civilian liaison to local enforcement. Under a private security contract tied to Lake Serenity's HOA, that's not legal. HOAs can't contract with private intelligence networks for community surveillance without state approval. This one didn't have it. I leaned back. This wasn't a power-hungry neighbor. This was a woman running a shadow system. And now I was inside it. My doorbell rang. My hand went instinctively to the holster strapped to my waist. I moved to the side window. No one. I opened the door. Slowly, a box sat on the welcome mat. No markings, no address. Just a single note taped to the top. This place will eat you alive. I brought it in, scanned for tracking devices, explosives, RF transmitters. Nothing. Inside was a manila. Folder filled with photos. My photos, taken that morning. Me unpacking, talking to the officers. Even one of me sleeping in the moving truck overnight. My blood chilled. Someone had been watching me since I got here. In the back of the folder was a map, the lake outlined. In red, with one particular shed circled, at Karen's backyard. I didn't wait. I changed into dark clothes, pulled my jacket tight, and waited for sundown. I wasn't going to break in. I was going to walk in and see what she did. Around 9:22 p.m., I made my move. The neighborhood was quiet, the type of silence that tells you people are listening. I walked down the path, toward the lake, then cut right. Behind the hedges, moving under tree cover until I reached the rear of Karen's house, her lights were on. She was in the kitchen, drinking wine, pacing. I saw her pick up her phone. I turned my attention to the shed. Locked. Padlock standard. I picked it in 7 seconds. Inside, darkness and dust. But as my eyes adjusted, I saw them. Rows of folders, files, labeled alphabetically. Residents of the neighborhood. Every one of them, and then mine, already labeled, already full. She had my military record, my transfer request, my undercover cases, my clearances, all marked flagged. That's when I heard the click behind me. Karen stood in the doorway. Holding a small gun. I knew you'd come, she said calmly. You people always need to know, so it gets you killed. I didn't move. I watched her hands. Why me? I asked. Because you don't belong, she said. Because you didn't follow procedure. This place is safe because I keep it safe. No one does anything here unless I say so. Her voice cracked a little. Control. That's what she needed. You're spying on your neighbors, I said. You're running a surveillance ring under a fake HOA shell? She smiled slightly. They're grateful, she whispered. They sleep soundly, and if they step out of line, they learn. Like you're learning now, I moved fast. Training took over. One motion, I slammed the shelf into her, disarmed her in 2 seconds, pinned her to the floor. You just assaulted a federal agent again, I hissed. Now you don't belong. I cuffed her, using the zip ties from my belt. She screamed, but I stuffed a rag into her mouth and secured it. This was no longer HOA business. I called a contact at the bureau, gave him the code phrase. Project Echo Chamber. His voice sharpened. Where? Lake Serenity, HOA. Evidence in hand. We're sending a team. I hung up. Karen thrashed, not out of fear, but rage. She knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. I waited outside for extraction. But as I stood under the stars, something didn't sit right. Karen was too calm. She wanted to be caught. That shed was too clean, too staged. Then it hit me. This was bait, a distraction. I raced back to my house, kicked the door in, too late. Everything was gone. My laptop, my phone, the documents, even the deed, cleaned out like it had never been lived in. The only thing left was a note on the fridge. We warned you. I handed them Karen. They were stunned. She didn't resist. Didn't blink. Just smiled. He doesn't know yet, she whispered to one of them. He only saw the part I let him see. That night, I slept in my truck again. But not because I felt unsafe, because I couldn't trust anyone in that community. Not the man walking his dog at midnight, not the old lady trimming her bushes at dawn, not even the cop who waved at me. Like we were friends. Something bigger was operating under Lake Serenity. And Karen was just the puppet. The real question wasn't, what was she doing? The real question was, who was she doing it for? And tomorrow, ... I would find out. I didn't sleep. Not really. I kept one hand on my weapon and the other on the ignition, ready to go. I watched the sun rise over the lake like a man waiting. For war, Karen was in federal custody, but the way she smiled when they took her, it wasn't defeat. It was confidence, and I knew why. She wasn't working alone. Someone else was still watching, still pulling strings, and now I was marked. At 6:14 a.m., I stepped out of the truck and walked back into the empty house. It felt colder than before. Not just empty, erased. Whoever broke in took everything that tied me here. Not a fingerprint left behind. No camera footage. No witnesses. And worst of all, no neighbors saw a thing. That's when I realized they weren't avoiding me. They were in on it. Not all of them, but some. Maybe many. I checked every window, door frame, crawl space. Nothing. I opened the attic hatch. Dust and darkness. I climbed up and scanned the beams. And that's when I found it, a blinking red light, no larger than a thumbtack, hidden in the corner where two rafters met. A listening device. Active. I removed it carefully and placed it in a signal-blocking pouch. That wasn't amateur tech. That was agency grade. Which agency, I didn't know yet. But whoever planted it had the skills, the access, and the nerve. To enter a federal agent's home and leave a message, I walked out onto the porch, scanned the street. Every driveway looked peaceful. But then I saw it 3 houses down. A curtain shifted. Fast. Too fast. Someone had been watching. I started toward the house. Mid-century 2-story. Pale blue with white trim. Rose bushes perfectly trimmed. I knocked. No answer. I knocked. Again. I wasn't going to ask twice. I stepped back, turned the knob, unlocked. That was a message too. I entered slowly. Federal agent, I called out. If you're inside, identify yourself. Silence. I moved room to room, living room empty, kitchen spotless, dining room untouched. But upstairs I found it. A small office, wall covered in photos of residents, strings connecting faces, dotted lines. Handwritten notes, paranoia or planning? Then I saw mine, a face circled in red. Notes beneath, agent, infiltrator, complication. I scanned the desk. A name tag sat face down. Frank Collier. I remembered that name. HOA treasurer, 2017 to 2020. Quiet. Moved to Florida after health issues. Except clearly he didn't. The room was abandoned now, dust settling where someone had once been hunting their neighbors. It wasn't just Karen's network. It was a web, and every resident was a thread. And somehow, they all thought this was normal. I collected the notes and exited quickly. As I stepped outside, a white van rolled past, slowing. Windows blacked out. No plates. I turned to face it, but it sped up and vanished down the hill. Not surveillance, intimidation. They wanted me to know I was exposed. I needed backup. I called Director Harlow. "What the hell did I walk into?" I asked. Ow. His voice was quiet. "We didn't send you there, Ryder. That assignment never came through my desk. You transferred 3 weeks ago voluntarily." My blood ran cold. "No, sir," I said. "You signed the papers." He was silent. Then I didn't. Transfer wasn't real. My assignment was fake. Someone forged federal orders to place me in this neighborhood. Someone high enough to access restricted systems. I ended the call and sat down on the porch steps. I wasn't the one investigating. I was the one being investigated. But for what? That's when my real phone buzzed. The secure line. Only 3 people had the number. One was Harlow. The second was in DC, the third was dead. So the voice on the line was synthetic, distorted. "You have 3 days, Agent Ryder? Leave the lake or join it." The call cut. I didn't recognize the voice. But I recognized the tone. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. I needed to go deeper. The answer wasn't in the houses. It was in the HOA itself. At 8:44 a.m., I walked into the HOA office. A small lakeside building disguised as a community welcome center. The receptionist, a thin woman with gray hair and eyes to calm, smiled tightly. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm here to review HOA financial records," I said. "Resident rights, Section 4, Subsection B. Full transparency on request." She hesitated. "We usually require a board vote," I interrupted. "Karen's in federal custody. You're down a vote." She nodded slowly and stepped. Aside, I walked through the back, entered the records room, and shut the door behind me. The files were too neat, like they'd been sanitized recently. But not all of them. In the bottom drawer behind landscaping invoices, I found a USB, no label, plugged it into my secured tablet, and opened the contents. Audio recordings. Hundreds. All dated over the last 6 months. One folder was marked with my name. I opened the first file. Karen's voice. "He's military, maybe more. Don't engage yet. We'll see who he reports to." Then another voice. "Male. Cold. He's a test. The board approved it." Karen replied, "If he figures it out." Silence then. "Terminate." I closed the file and backed out. My hands shook slightly. This wasn't surveillance. This was an operation. The HOA wasn't a cover. It was a front. I searched for anything identifying the board. 5 members. One was Karen. The others used code names North Star, Echo Bishop, Ivory. None traceable. But attached to their profiles were surveillance targets. Me, yes. Others too. Teachers, engineers, a retired colonel. They weren't spying randomly. They were testing influence, control, psychological manipulation, using the HOA model. As a real-world lab, Lake Serenity was a prototype. I was dropped into it unknowingly as a variable. A test subject. At 11 a.m., I left the records building. Receptionist wasn't at her desk. No cars outside, no movement. My phone vibrated again. Anonymous text. "You're getting close. It's good, but you should run." I didn't respond. I walked back home. My front door was open. Drew my weapon. Swept the hallway clear. On the kitchen table was a package. Inside, a single VHS tape and a portable player. A label. "Before the Lake." I played it. Grainy footage. A group of men in suits, sitting around a long table. A logo in the corner. Project Stillwater. A voice narrating influence without consent. Control without violence. Community models for long-term cognitive alignment. Then a face I recognized. Karen, younger. Not wind-drunk and bitter, sharp, composed, trained. She wasn't a bored housewife. She was a specialist. And this wasn't her neighborhood. It was her field site. I backed away from the screen. My phone buzzed again. Check the dock. I grabbed my coat and walked to the lake. Fog was rolling in. At the end of the dock, something floated in the water. I leaned in. It was a cooler. I hauled it up, opened it slowly. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was a dead raccoon. Its head had been removed. A message, clear and primal. I heard a camera. Click behind me. I turned. No one there. But someone had taken a photo, and someone was collecting evidence on me. They wanted me to snap. To look unstable. To be removed quietly. I walked back to the house and packed only what I needed, the USB. My badge, the notes from Collier's house. I called Harlow. I need extraction. Off book. Too late, he said. You're already flagged. I paused. By who? He hesitated. Not us. Then the line cut. They jammed the call. My signal was gone. Power flickered. All the lights shut off. I stood in the dark, breathing slowly. And I understood then, I wasn't just inside their experiment. I was now the center of it. The final variable. And this was the part where the system tried to erase me. But they made one mistake. I was trained to disappear. I wasn't going down quiet. I didn't move. The power was out, the house dead silent, and the shadows in the corners felt thicker than they should. I'd spent years walking through war zones, hunting foreign agents across borders, dismantling human trafficking rings with 2 men and a flashlight. And still, this was different. This was worse because it wasn't loud. It was subtle. It was weaponized silence. Targeted fear. I moved to the window, slowly peeled back the curtain. Across the street, lights still glowed in every home. I'd been cut off deliberately. Isolation. First step of behavioral destabilization. Classic PSY up protocol. Someone had flipped the switch on me, and now they were watching to see how I'd react. They expected panic, rage, mistakes, but I didn't give them any. I opened my go bag, swapped SIM cards, powered up my satellite backup. No signal, jammed too. That told me something critical. This wasn't a basement operation. This was well-funded, coordinated, possibly connected to black-budget intel work. And I'd just poked a hole in their fence. I needed a move they wouldn't expect. At 3:42 a.m., I slipped out the back, cut through the woods behind the house, and made my way toward the only unsecured entrance into HOA territory, the maintenance. Road behind Lot 17, where surveillance coverage had a documented 3-minute dead zone during shift changes. I reached it in under 2. Crouched beneath a pine tree, I listened. No movement. No chatter. Just wind and water. I crossed fast. Then, I moved toward the house of a man named Gil Navarro. Quiet, 60 former teacher. But more importantly, the only resident who ever filed a public complaint against Karen in 2022, he later retracted it, blamed medication, and never spoke of it again. But I had a hunch he didn't forget. I knocked twice, waited. No lights. I knocked again. Nothing. I started to turn, then the door creaked open 2 inches. You shouldn't be here, a voice whispered. Too late, I replied. They're already watching me. A pause. Then the door opened fully. Gil looked older than I remembered from the HOA roster photo, hair thin, eyes tired but sharp. He stepped aside without a word. Inside, the house was filled with books and dust. No TV, no router, no Alexa, no surveillance. He motioned toward the couch. They'll know you're here, he said. They already know everything, I said. Then tell me what you were too scared to say in 2022. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, it started with invitations. Quiet ones. It's not mailed. Hand-delivered. Karen said they were for a pilot program in behavioral integration. Said we'd be compensated. No one asked questions. He took a slow sip of tea, then continued. They installed smart meters. Surveillance lights. HOA fines increased. Random checks. cameras in mailboxes, and when people pushed back, pointed to a blank spot on the wall, they left, disappeared, moved away, sold their homes for pennies. But I saw them. Months later, same faces, new names. Blank eyes, like something got erased. My jaw clenched, and you stayed. He nodded. I played dumb. I stopped attending meetings. I pretended to lose my hearing. They stopped testing me, but not watching. I handed him the USB. These were in the HOA office. He took it, didn't flinch. Then you already know, he said. This isn't about a neighborhood. About control. Testing what people will accept. How far fear can go before someone breaks. I stood. They're trying to break me now. He looked up. Then break them first. I left before dawn, moving low through the trees, back to Ward. The lake. I had names now. Echo, North Star, Ivory, Bishop. Karen was just the face. The others were the core, and I was going to find them, one by one. I started with Ivory. That code name was attached to a folder referencing neuromodification tolerance, thresholds. That was science speak for psychological experimentation. The folder had one address tied to it. 14 Lakeshore View. I scoped it out mid-morning. Clean house, no car. But the mailbox had government stickers. Subtle. Not USPS. Langley. I waited. At 11:17 a.m., a woman stepped out. White lab coat, glasses, clipboard. She didn't look HOA. She looked NIH. I followed her to her car, trailed her across town to a nondescript brick building behind a private clinic. I parked 2 blocks down, entered through the rear fire escape, bypassed the alarm with a signal jammer, and moved through the upper floor until I reached the lab. Inside were files, charts, brain scans, most shocking, neighborhood maps overlaid. With thermal tracking and emotional response patterns, one file labeled Subject R311. Non-compliant, elevated aggression, resistant to suggestion, threat classification, terminate. That was me. They weren't monitoring emotions. They were manipulating them, using frequency-modulated streetlights, subsonic pulses, even chemically altered water lines. And the residents had no idea. I grabbed what I could, dumped the contents onto encrypted drives, and left a small signature card behind my old field symbol. Let them know I was inside their vault. Let them feel hunted now. By sunset, I'd ID'd 2 more code names. Bishop, likely the coordinator. Military background. House at lot 22. Gated, armed, and North Star. Internal security. Possibly Ixanasa, moved in 3 years ago under a false identity. I had faces now, targets. But before I moved, I needed one more thing. I returned home, swept again for bugs, found 2 more. One in the fridge, one in the ceiling fan. I left them in place. Let them think I was settling down. I set a pot of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, turned on a voice recorder. This is Agent Ryder, serial 7446, as of 1900 hours. I have confirmation that the Lake Serenity HOA is a front for unauthorized psychological testing and mass surveillance. Under Project Stillwater, residents are unaware test subjects. Karen Beaumont was a handler, not the architect. Operation is larger, tied to private contractors and federal shell agencies. Suspect infiltration into local law enforcement and possibly federal systems. Evidence. Secured. Extraction requested. If this is recovered posthumously, burn the site. All of it. I encrypted the file, sent it to 5 off-grid servers. Then I waited, because I knew they'd come soon. At 2:14 a.m., they did. 3 men. No lights, no chatter. Entry through the back window. Fast, tactical, silent. But I was ready. I let the first one cross the threshold, then I dropped him with a stun trap, rigged under the floorboard. The second one stepped into the hallway. I used a flashbang diversion, tackled him against the wall, snapped his arm clean. The third ran. I let him. I wanted him to tell them I wasn't hiding anymore. I was at war. The house smelled like burned metal and adrenaline. One attacker unconscious. One crippled. One escaped. I bound the first two with their own flex. Cuffs and dumped them in the pantry. They wouldn't talk. Trained, efficient, probably contractors. Not cheap. I studied their gear. All standard issue for covert ops. Noise-dampened boots, polymer blades, zero-mass armor. But there was one thing they hadn't hidden. A patch sewn inside one of the vests. Stillwater 5. Not a logo, a unit number. This wasn't just an experiment. This was a full deployment. I stepped outside into the night and looked down the street. Silent again, but not asleep. They knew what happened. And now, they were waiting for my next move. I didn't give them time. At 3:11 a.m., I was already crawling through the storm drain behind Lot 22, the home of the man they called Bishop. The military man. The field coordinator. His file said he moved here under the name Thomas Ridge, age 47. No known family. Claimed to be a logistics consultant. I'd seen that alias before in Kabul. It wasn't a consultant. It was a CIA disavow tag. He was a ghost. One of ours. I emerged behind the property, used a glass cutter to slip through the sunroom. No alarm. Inside, the house smelled like disinfectant and old files. Every picture on the wall was fake, staged families, stock images, that was standard for deep cover agents. No ties, no traces. I moved upstairs and found the office. It was locked, forced it open, and froze. Inside was a wall covered in photos of me, not just here, not just since the move. Old ones, military photos, ops from Afghanistan, intel briefings from Brazil, even my wedding in Berlin. Private moments that were never stored digitally. Things I hadn't even told the Bureau. This man didn't just know me. He studied me, obsessively. And in the center of the wall was a note, handwritten, pinned with a silver knife. Ryder, I warned them not to use you. I told them you wouldn't break. They said I was outdated. Let's see who's right. And then I knew. I ripped the photo off the wall, the one from 2014, Helmand Province, Team Recon. Ridge wasn't just a handler. It was on my unit. That meant one thing. I trained him, but I also burned him. He was pulled from the field after. A failed OP in Jordan that killed 4 civilians. He blamed me. Now he was in charge of Project Stillwater. I started backing out of the room when I heard the creak, floorboard behind me. Too late. The stun baton cracked across my shoulder, and I dropped to my knees. Ridge stood in the doorway, face like stone, voice cold. He said, "You always have to be the hero." I tried to stand, but he pressed the baton against my ribs. They told me you were a liability, but I convinced them. I said no. He's the final phase. I gritted my teeth. You're insane. He smiled. Maybe. But this neighborhood is working. Crime is 0. Compliance is 92%. Children score higher on emotional obedience tests. We built a perfect town, and you walked into it like a lamb. I shifted fast, elbowed him in the throat, rolled across the floor. He gasped, swung again. I ducked, grabbed the chair leg, and cracked it against his knee. He fell. I pressed my knee too. His chest pulled my badge. "You're done, Ridge. Stillwater ends tonight." He laughed, loud on his lip. "You think I'm the top? I'm just the leash. You haven't met the ones holding it." I froze. "Who?" He stared at me. "She's already watching." Think Karen was the queen? She was the pawn? She followed the real architect. I shoved harder. "Who's running this?" He whispered one word. "Your wife?" The world went silent. My blood froze. My wife died 7 years ago. Car bombing in Berlin. A retaliatory hit for an op I ran on Eastern networks. "You're lying," I said, voice shaking. Ridge's eyes never left mine. "That's what they told you, but she's alive, and she's running Stillwater?" She designed the model. She used you as the test subject. This whole thing, your transfer, your house, Karen's orders, all her. Pressed the baton to his chest. "You lie again, and I end you right here." But he didn't blink. "Go to the boathouse. End of the lake. Coordinates are in the code. You'll see." Left him there, tied, bleeding, and I ran. The boathouse at the far end of the lake had always been locked. HOA members said it was abandoned, full of old equipment, but now I knew better. I reached it by 4:22 a.m., heart racing. The code was hidden inside the Stillwater USB. 4 digits. My wedding anniversary. 614. I punched it in. The door clicked open. I stepped inside. Rows of monitors glowed softly. Surveillance feeds from every home, motional tracking graphs, audio logs, files, and then, at the center of the desk, a photo. My wife. Alive. Not a duplicate. Not a trick. A current photo. She was older, harsher, wearing a tactical headset, standing in front of a screen labeled Stillwater Command. I fell into the chair. I couldn't breathe. She was alive. Her death, and she built this nightmare. My phone vibrated. Satellite channel. Unknown number, I answered. Hello, Ryder, her voice said. Calm, like nothing had changed. It's good to see you found the truth. My throat tightened. Why? She sighed softly. Because they needed someone they couldn't break. Someone with a mind strong enough to anchor the control group. You were the constant. That's why it worked. You lied to me, I said. You let me bury you. You let me spiral. I had to disappear, she said. You'd never have let this happen otherwise, but it's too late to stop it now. Stillwater works, and soon there will be more. I looked around the room. So much data, so much precision. How many sites? She paused. 7. Then she hung up. I stood there, surrounded by the truth. My wife was alive. She built this. I was the keystone of a psychological weapon deployed on U.S. soil, and the war had only begun. But they underestimated me, again. Because if Stillwater started with me, it would end with me. I stared at the monitors, her face still burned into the screen like an afterimage. My wife. The woman I buried. The woman who now hunted me. The feeds around me buzzed softly, heat maps of residents, audio logs from kitchens, facial emotion scans from door cameras.
Ow.
This wasn't just surveillance. This was preemptive psychological warfare. The weapon wasn't far, it was certainty. They didn't want obedience. They wanted alignment. That had been the seed, the anchor that made the neighborhood stable, living proof, faux concept. But now that I'd seen it, touched it, breathed it, I had to destroy it. I stood from the desk and opened the cabinets, lined with drives, storage units, hard copies. The entire framework of Project Stillwater, here in this boathouse. I pulled a fuel can from the corner, unscrewed the cap, and doused the walls. Cables, the cabinets. The smell hit instantly pure, raw gasoline. I pulled my lighter, held it just above the desk. A single blue flame danced. For the record, I said aloud, you built the perfect trap. Then I dropped it. The fire caught fast. Screens went first glass, exploding, sparks flaring. I walked out into the dawn, smoke rising behind me like a signal flare. Not just a fire, a declaration. The system just lost its core. She'd feel it. She'd watch the data collapse in real time and know, Ryder's off the leash. And now he's coming. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Stillwater had 7 sites. I only knew 1. But if there was one leak inside the bureau, there could be more. I needed intel. I knew exactly where to get it. By 7:06 a.m., I was inside the holding unit where Ridge codename Bishop was being held. The bureau had picked him up after I called it in anonymously. The cover story was simple. Rogue, HOA manager, community fraud. But I knew the truth. So did he. I walked into the room. Was chained to a steel table, looking like a man who had seen death and didn't blink. You burned it, he said, voice low. Good, I sat across from him. Tell me where the other sites are. He smiled slightly. You think she'd let me live after that fire? He leaned in. She's already planning phase 2, and this time they're starting with kids, schools, whole districts built. On control? I didn't react, just stared. He nodded slowly. She used to talk about you in the early years. Said you were the only person who never broke. That's why she used you. You were the virus they couldn't replicate, but they could build around. I stood. You're not giving me anything. He laughed once. I just gave you everything. I walked out. But I already knew what he meant. The next site wouldn't be another neighborhood. It would be a place where compliance is routine, normalized, embedded in structure. And there was only one place like that in our jurisdiction, Northport Academy, elite private school, funded by private donors, many of whom sat quietly on community integration boards. I checked the ledger. One of them? W. Ryder, my wife, her signature on the donor list. Northport was the next launch site. I needed to move now. At 10:38 a.m., I arrived. Sprawling campus, behind steel gates, polished brick, flags waving, kids in uniforms. Everything looked normal. Too normal. I scanned the area, logged the facial patterns. 80% neutral, 20% positive, 0% spontaneous. That's not school. That's conditioning. I slipped inside using a parent ID clone and made my way to the administrative wing. At the end of the hall was a locked room marked Operations. I picked the lock in 10 seconds, stepped inside, and froze. Rows of screens again. Smaller, but the same system. This was Stillwater 2.0, and on one screen a live feed of my house. Not past footage live. Someone had already replaced the gear I destroyed, watching to see if I returned. That meant one thing: the mole wasn't just in the bureau. They were inside the school. I moved to the central console and uploaded a data snare, pulled the site logs, backed them up. And then I saw it. Under System Access History, Admin Override. A green. Amanda Green. Specialized in behavior prediction. Recruited 7 years ago. After my wife's death, disappeared. No exit file. Out. No employment trail. Until now, she was here. And she had access to the control software. She wasn't just a handler. She was the bridge. The one connecting federal systems to Stillwater's backend. The one making this all legal enough to hide. I had to find her. I walked out, calm, silent. Followed the staff hallways, past classrooms full of perfect posture and blank faces. Found the side office marked Assessment Director. No answer. I picked it, slid inside. Amanda was at her desk, blonde hair pulled back. Same calculating eyes I remembered from briefing rooms. It's been a long time, I said. She looked up. Didn't flinch. I knew you'd come eventually. I stepped forward. You're the link. You've been feeding her intel. You forged the transfer. You moved me into the test. She nodded slowly. She needed someone she trusted. I was that person. And I believed in what we were building. Control, I said. Obedience. She stood. Stability, she said. After all you've seen, you know the world is cracking. She found a way to fix it. One neighborhood at a time. I shook my head. By burning free will? She looked at me like I didn't get it. Free will is a myth. We shape each other every day. All we did was codify it, predict it, optimize it. I stepped closer. You've turned people into data points, kids, families. Me. She smiled. And it worked. That was it. I swung fast, grabbed her wrist, twisted, pinned her against the wall. Give me the locations, I said. Now she didn't resist. You'll never stop it, she whispered, but I'll give you one. Not because I'm scared, but because I want you to see it. The moment it breaks you, I let go. She walked to the drawer, pulled a folder. Inside was a single word: Stillwater. Prime. An underground site, hidden beneath a federal training base in New Mexico. Code protected, staffed by civilians and ex-agents. The real hub, the core. She looked me in the eye. She'll be there. But so will everyone she's trained. I took the folder, and I'll bring them all down. She laughed. You think this ends with her? I turned to the door. No, I said. It ends with me.